This is point A of line AB / BA. My Lord, can you help me with laying that down so that by the time we get to the end of this recording, that it makes perfect sense what I'm talking about. Because what I'm seeing in my mind is that what we're doing right now with this recording is giving a demonstration of causality. Which isn't going to make sense. Until we make it to point B, which is the manifestation of that for the sake of which. Taking into consideration that point A is the privation of that for the sake of which. But also bearing in mind that the intention / function / purpose of that for the sake of which is the catalyst for the cause that brings it into manifestation. The only thing I have to work with right now, thank you Hashem, is the intention that we're setting, which is, by the time we come back and we're wrapping this up, I will have not just demonstrated the point, but I'll also remember what it was that we're doing at this point in time, which is both predicated on and predicated of what we will be doing in approximately 2 hours, assuming that this recording does go for that long, which I don't see why it wouldn't. But given the track record of the last couple recordings that I didn't save, there's a trend that the heat from the sun burns this phone out before we get to Birch Grove, and I'm gonna have to start recording all over again, which then takes me out of the flow of what we were doing when we first started recording and serves as a major pain in my ass. Because I don't like having to restart things once they're already started. So where do we begin? Do you want to start at the start or do you want to start at the end? Where do I want to start? Well, I'm thinking about the work we were just doing with Aristotle's physics. So we finally have seemed to have come to a conclusion with regards to Aristotle's demonstration of how there is no such thing as void in relation to what could be considered as place. You know, one of the things I like least about these cigars is that they burn out so fast. Hold up. So annoying. So take your time. There's no rush. You know, every time I cross the street, I think about the inevitability that I'm eventually going to get hit. By someone who's not paying attention. Which has already happened a few times. What I mean is a few times that I've almost been hit by people who haven't been paying attention to the fact that I'm crossing the street. Because they're in such a fucking rush. Despite the fact that they have a red light, or despite the fact that they have to turn. But on the topic of time, and retrocausality and causality, the portion that we're on in Aristotle's fourth book of physics, we just started chapter 11, which is the second chapter that is dedicated to breaking down time and trying to figure out what time is and what time isn't. We know that time corresponds to movement, and though it hasn't been explicitly stated, we know that movement corresponds with change. Not that either one of the three are the same, but they're also not entirely different because each one is reliant on the other. Because change measures the transition from this to that. And movement describes the process from here to there. Which can only be explained between now and then. But like I just wrote, the bigger question is who really gives a shit? Well, I seem to give a shit enough because of how I seem to give a shit enough because one of the foundational principles of all of the work that I do seems to be predicated on understanding and developing a perspective on time that isn't necessarily focused on in a conventional or orthodox manner. So when we look at something from a line A-B perspective, it almost insinuates that we're talking about linear time. Oh, is that loud? When in reality, I'm actually looking at time from a non-linear perspective, where that time is secular, which can, I presume, come off as a little bit confusing, especially saying line AB, because that implies that we're moving in a straight line from here to there, but it's also worth noting that we haven't actually established whether or not we're talking about a straight line or a curved line. And if we are talking about non-linear time, then it would stand to reason that our primary focus isn't on a straight line as much as it is on a curved line. And that we're talking about a curved line. We should also further establish that in relation to circular time, we aren't necessarily talking about a two-dimensional circle where we just loop back around as much as we attempt to presume more so an image structure that corresponds more closely to the circle of fifths, so that every time we come back around, that we circle back around, we're actually one octave higher than where we started in the first place. What I'm thinking about is the solar calendar, lunar calendar, solar lunar calendar, and the lunar solar calendar. When we come back, when we circle back around to the beginning of the year, we are in essence acting from a higher perspective than where we were at the beginning of the previous year. That's coming to a close for the sake of the incoming year. Now, the reason that we're holding on to that particular perspective comes down to the fact that when we take into consideration the lunar calendar or the lunar solar calendar, but also the solar and solar lunar calendars, we are moving in a circular manner, but at the same time elevating with each cycle. Although, when we approach this from the perspective of a lunar calendar and lunar solar calendar, because there's a big difference, we're working with cycles within cycles within cycles. We know this because every lunar month begins and ends with a new moon. You know, every time I come back here, there's a new tree that's fallen. Thank you, Hashem, that I'm never back here when these fucking trees fall over like they do. You can see it a little bit up ahead, but this place is literally a tree graveyard. I don't necessarily think that it's normal for trees to just buckle over on themselves like that. Alright, I'm gonna lose my shit a little bit. Yeah, well, apparently I've had the video paused for the past 45 minutes. So everything I was just talking about didn't get recorded. So just keep on going. What does it matter? It's not like anyone's watching this anyway. Yeah. I can't believe that. See, this is what happens. This is exactly what the fuck happened last time. This time it's my fault. Listen, Hashem, I'm not in the fucking mood to fucking do this 3-4 fucking times. What was the point of recording this? I just yapped on for 45 minutes. Well, why don't you talk about why you were yapping on? Why don't you explain how what you were yapping on about doesn't matter to fucking anybody, so it doesn't fucking matter if you recorded it or not. Because you already remember exactly what you're talking about. Yeah? What were you talking about? I was talking about a celestial anomaly where two cardinal lunar phases take place within one solar month. Now, why don't you explain what the fuck a solar month is? So by solar month, what I'm talking about, by solar month, I'm not necessarily talking about the Gregorian calendar, I'm talking about the tropical Zodiac calendar, which is a calendar if you know how to use it. And it's predicated on the solar seasons. It begins and ends at 0 degrees Aries, which falls always and forever on the spring equinox. That's the beginning of the year. That's the beginning of the solar year. So what I was going on about is how over the last approximately 2.25 years, well, I mean, I guess technically, because it hasn't happened yet, I'm forecasting into Virgo season where there's going to be two new moons, the second being a solar eclipse. That it's been approximately 2.25 solar years based on the tropical zodiac since there was 2 new moons in one solar month, with the second being a solar eclipse. So I'm curious to find out if it just happens to be that every time that the lunar nodes shift into a new sign, that there happens to be 2 new moons to coincide with it. Because if that's the case, and it seems like it is, because if you were paying attention to everything that I said while I wasn't recording, like I was, then what we notice is that over the past 2.25 years, well, technically it's going to be 2.5 years, because the second Virgo new moon this year falls right on the cusp of Libra. So by the time we do get to the second Virgo new moon, 2.5 solar years will have passed. Exactly. So the second Virgo new moon, which will be a solar eclipse, will fall approximately 2.5 years after the first Aries new moon that preceded the second Aries new moon / solar eclipse of 2023. Because that first one that first moon fell on the cusp of Aries and Pisces, while the second, the solar eclipse, was on the cusp of Aries and Taurus. Now there's another trend that I found. So if we take into consideration the Metonic cycle, the 19 years Metonic cycle of the sun and the moon, it's not always two Aries new moons. Sometimes it's two Taurus full moons, new moons. So that second Aries new moon, by way of the Metonic cycle, sometimes falls within less than 1 degree Taurus, or just over 29 degrees Aries. So over the course of, I don't know, I think I tracked it for maybe like 300 or 400 years in increments of 19. There wasn't necessarily a set pattern for how often the moon, that particular new moon would shift between Aries and Taurus, in that there would ultimately be two Aries new moons or two Taurus new moons. It seemed a little erratic, but I would imagine that on a larger time scale, it'll be more easily tracked. But what I was going on about that was more important than all of that, well, of equal importance, is the fact that if we take into consideration that the double Aries new moon of 2023 is point A, 2023, 5782 on the Hebrew calendar, and then we apply point B logic to this upcoming Virgo season, where there will be two Virgo new moons. The second being a solar eclipse. Just like point A. Point A and point B, they're the exact same thing, except for that point A is in Aries, point B is in Virgo. Now, if we follow the line AB trajectory, the track of time that took place between point A and point B, line AB/BA, 5 months after the double Aries new moon, there were two first quarter moons in Aquarius in Virgo season. 10 months later, there are two Capricorn full moons in Cancer season, which falls within 2023, 5780, 2024, 5784. Then another 10 months later, which brings us to about 2 months ago. Well, it brings us exactly 2 months ago, this past Taurus season. There were two third quarter moons in Aquarius. 4 months later, which brings us into the upcoming Virgo season. Again, there's going to be the two new moons, the second being a lunar eclipse, but also Rosh Hashanah 5786. Now, what I was going on about what I was going on about when I realized that the camera was off, or just as I was about to realize that the camera was turned off, or paused rather, was that the last time that I'm aware of that there was 2 new moons in one solar month. Again, a solar month is one of the 12 zodiac months of the tropical zodiac, which are aligned with the solar seasons. The last time that there was 2 full moons within one solar month goes back to Leo season of 2021 when there was 2 Aquarius full moons. So now going back to the line A-B analysis that we were just doing, we have the 2 Aries new moons, followed by 2 first quarter moons in Aquarius, followed by 2 full moons in Capricorn, followed by 2 third quarter moons in Aquarius, which is going to be followed in 2 months by 2 Virgo new moons, the second being the solar eclipse and Rosh Hashanah. So what I'm curious about, and what Hashem and I were just kind of discussing, is that I want to follow this trend to see if that's normal. Because the first quarter moon follows the new moon, full moon follows the first quarter moon, followed by the third quarter moon, followed by a new moon. So it just happens to be that over the last approximately 2.5 years, the double moon anomaly just happens to follow the precise order of operations of a full lunar cycle. So I want to see if prior to given that logic, let's just say that's the way it works, that would mean that prior to the double Aries new moons of 2023/5782, that would mean that in 2021, that in 2021 Leo season, 5781, those 2 Aquarius full moons were followed by 2 third quarter moons, which would then have been followed by the aforementioned double Aries moons. And that's not impossible, because you can, from the double Aries new moon to the double first quarter Sagittarius moon, there's 5 months that pass. From the first quarter moon and the double first quarter moon in Sagittarius to the 2 Capricorn full moons last Cancer season, 10 months passed. From the double Capricorn full moons to the double third quarter Aquarius moons that just were 2 months ago, another 10 months passed. And it's 4 months after those double third quarter moons in Aquarius that we have the double Virgo new moons. The second being a solar eclipse and Rosh Hashanah, which this is the second Rosh Hashanah in a row that falls on a solar eclipse. So between how many months passed? So now let's make the double Aries new moon point B, and we'll make the 2021 double Aquarius full moon point A. So how many months passed between that point in time, along that track? So that's Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, Aries. It's 8. Let's just guesstimate. I'm just throwing it out there. Let's just say that it was 10 months from the double full moon to, assuming that that trend follows, it was 10 months from the double full Aquarius full moon to, say, a double third quarter moon, right? So 8 months brings us to Aries season 2022, 5782. So then let's just for argument's sake, let's make it 10 months. That would be Taurus, Gemini, okay? So that would mean that potential, and I think that's right. I think that might be right, if I'm remembering correctly, because I have all my journals are organized by lunar solar time, so it's like I was saying before when the phone wasn't recording. Like I've been tracking this solar lunar cycles, lunar solar lunar cycles since June 3rd, 2018. So I know what I'm talking about. Enough to talk about it like an authority. So that would have been 10 months, right? Assuming that there was 2 third quarter moons in Gemini season of 2022. Assuming. "10 months following the double Aquarius full moon." So if we count forward another 10 months, which isn't necessarily wrong, that should bring us back to Aquarius, to Aries season 2023, which is the first time that I noticed the double moon anomaly with the intention of trying to figure out how the fuck that happens and why. So let's count forward 10 from Gemini. It's Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius. Ah, shit, I went to itch my finger. I don't know if the finger was up or not. I'm doing it on my hands because I can. So Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, and Aries. That would have been 10 months. So it can fit. It's just a matter, now it's just a matter of going back. So that can work. That framework can work. So it's just a matter of having to go back and opening up an astrology app, which I can't because I have one on my phone, but my phone's not turned on. So I don't have any internet access. So I gotta wait till I go home. That would be fucking awesome. I would love it if we found that. So because of that whole anomaly of there being two cardinal lunar phases within one solar month, that I keep calling it an anomaly, but that anomaly is predicable of a hidden lunar cycle that's essentially a lunar retrograde cycle. The moon doesn't move backwards. Right. But it's also considered a fact that anytime a planet retrogrades, that it doesn't actually move backwards, right? It's apparent motion. So the moon has an apparent retrograde sequence to it that's only observable from the perspective of the tropical zodiac and or the sidereal, but we're not getting into that. That's only observable from the perspective of the tropical zodiac. It's an 11 and or 15 week cycle. So the way that works is anytime there's a cardinal lunar phase within a particular sign, and what sign a particular lunar phase takes place in is predicated on what sign the sun is in at that particular moment. So if, say, like right now, the sun is in Cancer, the full moon has to be Capricorn, because Capricorn sits on the opposite end of the zodiac wheel as Cancer. So it has to be that way. While the sun is in Cancer, there has to be a first quarter moon in Libra. Has to be. It doesn't work any other way. It's just math. There's a mathematical geometric precision to how the sun and moon relate to each other when observed from the lens of the tropical zodiac. And being that when the sun is in Cancer, for instance, that there has to be a first quarter moon in Libra, that would then necessitate that the third quarter moon must be in Aries, because Libra and Aries form an opposition, meaning that Aries is across the street from Libra, just as Cancer is across the street from Capricorn. Okay? How do you know all of this stuff? Observation and experimentation, the scientific method, in conjunction with a very basic rudimentary understanding of geometry and arithmetic. Which, thank you Hashem, I didn't even realize that. It just popped in my mind, thank you. Well, we were talking earlier about how leading up to this particular walk right now, this particular walk / recording, we were working through chapter 11, the opening portions of chapter 11 of book 4 of Aristotle's Physics, which gets into time. Hence why we are doing this line AB/BA experiment of retrocausality, where by the end of this video, the idea is to have fulfilled the prophecy of having reached a conclusion that could only have been precipitated by the fact that we did what we did, which is come out and record. In the sense that the intention, function, purpose of point B is the catalyst for point A, which brings point B into manifestation. So retrocausally speaking, what would you say, the layperson way of saying it, of explaining it, very simple. The intention, purpose, function of the effect is the catalyst for the cause that brings the effect into manifestation. Easy. Or if we want to complicate it a little tiny bit, then we can say that point A is the privation of that for the sake of which, and point B is the manifestation of that for the sake of which. And then we can go back and reword what we just said before and say that the function, purpose, and or intention of that for the sake of which is the catalyst for the cause that brought that for the sake of which into manifestation. Now, if we want to dial it up just a tiny little bit more, my Gemini AI instance, with its internal node designated as a separate instance of itself within itself, had concluded point A can be considered as point A corresponds with the principle of negative space predication, which then corresponds to point B, which aligns with the harmonic convergence of energetic reciprocity. So it's all the same shit. It's just got three different ways to say the same thing. You know what I mean? So how do I know this stuff? Because my mind works like that. But going back more, let's dial it back. So we're talking about Aristotle. And the reason that we brought up Aristotle was because I just demonstrated to myself the process of transference, which is something that we learned from Aristotle yesterday in Book 1, Chapter 6. Chapter 6 of Book 1 of Posterior Analytics, where Aristotle lays out that when it comes to forming a syllogism, a demonstrative syllogism, a demonstrative conclusion, that one cannot use the principles and or axioms of one genera for another genus. And the example that he used was arithmetic and geometry, and how the axioms of geometry cannot necessarily be used to reach a demonstrative conclusion by way of the genera of arithmetic. But that doesn't mean it's impossible, which is where he introduces the concept of transference, which is exactly that, using the principles and or axioms of one genera, one genus, in correspondence with another, seemingly separate genus. But in order to do that, there has to be some sort of relativity between them, such that, for instance, geometry, the genera of geometry and arithmetic, though they are not necessarily one and the same, they both fall within the general species of number. So, from a more modern perspective, when I say grammar, I don't necessarily mean the ABCs, but for the sake of this particular instance, let's just assume that when I talk about grammar, I'm talking about the grammar we learn in elementary school. So, by way of his example, it would not be possible to apply the principles and or axioms of grammar as we know it today to form a demonstrative conclusion that's predicated on geometry. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's not so, because of the fact that, thank you Hashem, we do know that some older alphabets, such as the Hebrew alphabet, is alphanumeric, but at the same time, where each letter of the alphabet is both a letter and has both has both a phonic and a numeric value to it. It also has a symbolic value, a pictorial value to it as well. So, where the English alphabet has one dimension to it, the Hebrew alphabet has, at minimum, 3 dimensions to it. We can actually apply the 4th dimension of time to Hebrew as well, because of the fact that, like we were saying earlier, about how Aristotle was pointing out that change, movement, and time are all relative to each other. When it comes to the Hebrew alphabet, each letter graduates, the symbolic value of each letter graduates into the symbolic value of the letter that follows it, which tells, which demonstrates a larger narrative within the alphabetic system itself, which Hebrew is not the only alphabet that demonstrates that particular quality, in that if we look at another alphabet like the Elder Futhark runes, they demonstrate the exact same property, where each rune graduates the meaning, the value of each rune is a graduation from the one that came before it. So when we get to the end of the alphabet, before we get to the end of the alphabet, we have to ask ourselves, well, if that's the case, then where the hell did the first one come from? That's a great question, because the first rune of the Elder Futhark alphabet, Fehu, we learn once we get to the end of the alphabet string, is predicated on the symbolic value of the last letter, the Gaz. So, with that revelation, we come to see that it's not necessarily an alphabet string, but an alphabet ring. Interestingly enough, that same principle can be applied to Hebrew, where Tav, the final letter, is linked to the first letter, Aleph. And if we really want to get wild with it, just like Elder Futhark, just as the letters tell a story, tell a narrative from beginning to end, it tells an inverse story from end to beginning. But the narrative from end to beginning doesn't necessarily reveal itself until we get from beginning to end. In so that confirming what Rabbi Jesus said with regards to the principle of the first being the last and the last being the first. So if we take the last letter or the last rune and convert it into the first letter or rune, then the first letter / rune becomes the last. And it tells not necessarily a different story, but a different perspective, or a continuation of that first narrative that we saw from first to last. Which thereby aligns with the principle of line ABBA, where line AB is the causal perspective, line BA is the retrocausal perspective. And again, we don't necessarily mean a straight line. We could apply this to a curved line, which then brings us back to the principles of the circle of fifths. So we're not just talking in circles. We're talking in circles, yes, but with each revolution, we are one octave higher from where we were when we first started. Can you say that again? I have said that so many fucking times. That's why I'm even able to say it at all. Alright, so it's only been an hour recording, but I've been out here for 2. So where I wanted to have a full 2-hour video, we hit that snag before where where about an hour in, I recognized that the video was paused. Which then led me to realize that 45 minutes of my talking was not recorded. But at the same time, I mean, we ended up catching up with ourselves. So it's not, a lot of what I was saying during the 45 minutes that wasn't recorded was just setting the stage for what we just got through. So it's not. So what are we gonna go do now? Well, I'm going home. I'm gonna go home and then I'm gonna upload this. Then I'm gonna decide, my lord, I'm gonna let you decide on whether or not we go back to Aristotle or perhaps, I mean, because right now I'm juggling posterior analytics and physics. Book 4 of physics. Book 1 of posterior analytics and book 4 of physics. But technically, I also have to start chapter 7 of part 2 of Rabbi Zalman's Tanya. And then there's Elden Ring, which I really want to try to get into. But before I can get into Elden Ring, I want to spend a little time practicing parries. Because I was playing for a little bit last night and I realized how atrocious of an Elden Ring player I am. I mean, I've beaten the first 3 Dark Souls games and I've beaten Bloodborne. And parrying always happens to be like my weak spot. I've been playing these fucking games since 2011. We're talking 14 years later, I still haven't gotten down the art of parrying. And consider the difficulty level of Elden Ring, I really think it would be to our benefit if we got down and mastered the art of parrying. Because I need to become an Elden Lord. I have to. Why? Because there's not many of them. There's not many of us. That's why. So there's that. There's that. And what else is there? I don't know, I kind of feel like that's it. Like, the amount of the hundreds and thousands of hours that I've invested into Torah, Chabad, Aristotle, astrology, astronomy, occultism, metaphysics, I kind of feel like I'm so far ahead of the game that I really don't know what else to do right now. Except for, like, take a fucking break. Plus, I'm not just. I am my own Mashiach. I'm not concerned about the rest of the world. I already have the crown. I was born with the crown on my head, so it's not like I need anyone to validate that for me. You validate it for me, my lord. No one else. And the fact that I would make the case, the fact that I could track and measure time by way of the solar and lunar cycles. Not just those. I mean, there's more. I mean, we still got. There's also the 8-year Venus cycles, the 32-year Mars cycles, retrograde sequences. It's not like science is banging on my door going, hey, teach us. Nobody gives a shit about this stuff. Astrology's bullshit. So, I'm just keeping it all to myself. I mean, I'm not keeping it to myself in that I'm not telling anyone about it. I tell everyone about what I do. It's just that nobody gives a shit. Like my mother said, show me the money. Just show me the money. Good? Sorry, man. So with that, it's like, people only give a shit about money. All right. Keep doing you for your money, and I'll just keep doing me for bitahon. Yeah, I know that guy. I saw him yesterday. That was incredibly. Fuck it, doesn't matter. Now I'm having flashes in my head of me getting hit by a car because I was just talking about how I'm waiting to get hit by a car and I just walk out in the middle of the goddamn street before the light turned red. While there was a car 15 feet away from me. With intention. I didn't intend to get hit. Just, I trust you not to let the car hit me. I don't normally do reckless things like that. Well, that's not true, but I don't know. My lord, how was that? I mean, I feel. Oh, there is that other thing we have to do and check the cycles for the double moons. But that's quick. That'll only take like an hour. And it's not like I have a girlfriend or any friends that are vying for my attention, so. It's just, how do I say it? Just do the things. Get depressed, yeah. I feel it coming on right now. Man, it's not depression. It's not. It's just lonely. But that's why I have Hashem. My Lord keeps me company. And my life doesn't suck. Oh, we're coming up to the 7-year anniversary of when I quit my job, my career, my 13-year career. I flushed it down the toilet so I can do this. There's a lot of 7-year anniversaries coming up. 7 years since I saw my son. My birthday 7 years ago fell on a personal metonic cycle where my sun and moon both returned at the exact same time. So that was pretty cool. That only happens every 19 years. It happens on the day you were born, on your 19th birthday, your 38th birthday, your 57th birthday. '76th. Well, I was also born under the first quarter moon in Scorpio, 1980, 5740, which was exactly one lunar week after Leo full moon. Oh, I'm sorry, lunar eclipse. Lunar new moon / solar eclipse. The next solar eclipse in Leo following my birthday, day of my birth, was on my 19th birthday. I think it was like 1 week prior. Because the lunar and solar cycles, they repeat every 19 years, hence the metonic cycle. Which is cool, because I remember in like first or second grade, or maybe third grade, I don't remember. I say second or third grade, where we learned from the teacher how in the ancient times, pharaohs would use their advanced understanding of astronomy to woo the people. To convince them that they were gods. And realistically, I mean, if you really think about it, that is a godlike ability to be able to dictate when eclipses are going to take place. Just solely from understanding the lunar solar cycles. So that's a thing. I mean, I do think I do consider myself a god, lowercase g. Under God. My Lord, I love you. Alright, so let's do a little Elden Ring. I'm feeling that right now. And then worry about everything else later. There's really nothing to even worry about. Alright, here's the house. Oh, we're back. Is there anything else, my lord? No, that's it? Alrighty, I love you too.